Hello everyone, let's go over lab exercise 1, the endocrine system. These are the learning objectives which we expect you to know when you are done with this lab exercise. So there are 8 objectives and you have to know all of these points. Let us start. To maintain homeostasis, our body systems need to communicate with each other. Nervous system communicates through electrical signals which travel in the neurons. We have another system. That system is known as endocrine system. It is a system of glands. These glands, they secrete chemical substances into the blood. These chemical substances are known as hormones. These hormones, they travel through the blood and they reach their target cells. Together, the nervous system and the endocrine system, they regulate activity of organ systems in the body. Let's look at some important aspects of the endocrine system. Endocrine system, it consists of a system of glands. These glands, they are present in different parts of the body. These glands, they do not have ducts. They secrete hormones directly into the blood. Their target cells are located at different locations in the body and they reach these target cells through bloodstream. Now let's learn a little about hormones. As I said before, hormones are chemical substances. They can be proteins or they can be steroids. They are slower to elicit a response in comparison to a neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters, because they are traveling down a neuron in the axon of a neuron, so they act very fast. That is very fast signaling and response system. Whereas hormones, they travel in the blood and they take longer time compared to the neurotransmitters to start a response. But their response is longer compared to the neurotransmitter. And the response, it stops when the hormone, it detaches from the receptor and it breaks down. Now these hormones have certain target cells. These target cells are the cells which have the ability to respond to a particular hormone. And why do they have the ability to respond to that hormone? Because they have receptors specific for that hormone. So different types of hormones have different types of receptors which are specific to that hormone. It means that a hormone, a receptor for a certain hormone is going to respond only to that hormone. And to these receptors, these hormones, they bind. These receptors can be present on the outer surface of the cell membrane or the inside of the cell. And these receptors, they can be upgraded and they can also be downgraded. So when a cell wants to catch more of the hormone from the bloodstream, it can upgrade these receptors. Similarly, when the cell does not require too much of the hormone to come inside, these receptors, they can be downgraded. Then these hormones, they have feedback mechanisms. We will learn about these mechanisms in another slide. You have to know the difference between the hormones and the neurotransmitters. So nervous system, it uses the neurotransmitters, and the endocrine system, it uses the hormones. This is a table present in your Pearson e-text, and they have enumerated the differences. You can always go to your text and you can go over this table. Okay, so now coming back to the manual, let's look at the feedback mechanisms. What are these feedback mechanisms? To maintain homeostasis, secretion of a hormone can be increased or decreased by feedback mechanism. These mechanisms can be negative feedback or positive feedback. The negative feedback is going to decrease the hormone secretion, and the positive feedback is going to increase the hormone secretion. Let's go over this image. Okay, so before I Before I discuss this image, let me introduce you to a term which is known as tropic hormone. What is a tropic hormone? Some hormones they cause other endocrine glands to secrete the hormones. So for example, consider an endocrine gland, it secretes a hormone. That hormone is going to go to another endocrine gland and it will cause that endocrine gland to secrete a hormone. These hormones are known as tropic hormones. There is another term, it is known as trophic hormones. TROPHIC. Please search the differences. So you have to know what are tropic hormones and what are trophic hormones. Now let's come back to this image. Look at the negative feedback pathway. Hypothalamus, it secretes a hormone. That hormone acts on the target cells located in the anterior pituitary gland. As a response, the anterior pituitary gland, it secretes some hormones which go to another endocrine gland and they act on it. In this example, we are considering testes. So hypothalamus has secreted a hormone which is a tropic hormone. That tropic hormone goes to the anterior pituitary. As a response, the anterior pituitary secretes a hormone, and this is also a tropic hormone, so it goes to another endocrine gland and it causes that endocrine gland to secrete its specific hormone. So in this example, we are using testes. So now the hormone from the anterior pituitary is acting upon the testes. As a result, the testes, they secrete testosterone. Now this testosterone, it is secreted into the blood. So hypothalamus is secreting in the blood, and then anterior pituitary is secreting in the blood to go to this gland. And just please make note that this is anterior pituitary, okay, because in pituitary gland we have an anterior pituitary gland and then we have a posterior pituitary. So this is anterior pituitary pathway. All right, so coming back here, so that testosterone, it goes in the blood and it travels to the target tissue. So in this example, it is going to the muscle and it is going to increase the muscle size. And then this hormone also through the blood, it comes back to the anterior pituitary and you can see this negative sign. Now it is decreasing the secretion of the hormone by the anterior pituitary, which was causing this pathway to go this way. And similarly, it also goes to the hypothalamus, and in the hypothalamus also it decreases, it has a negative effect on the secretion of the hypothalamus. So this pathway is stopped. This is known as negative feedback. Now let's look at this other side, the positive feedback. So in positive feedback, the hypothalamus, it secreted a hormone. That hormone goes to the anterior pituitary and it stimulates the specific target cells of the anterior pituitary to make a specific hormone. That hormone goes in the blood and goes to to the endocrine gland, which has target cells for that hormone. And that endocrine gland, in this example, they're considering an ovary. That target hormone, the ovary, it secretes estradiol, which is a type of an estrogen. And now this estradiol, it is secreted in the blood. It goes to the target tissues and it also travels through the blood back to the anterior pituitary. But this positive sign is telling you that this is enhancing this pathway. So it is causing the anterior pituitary to secrete more of its stimulating hormone. So this is known as positive feedback. This brings us to this page of the manual. And now let's see the learning objectives covered by 1, 2, and 3. Let's try to learn them. So we have to differentiate between neurotransmitters and hormones. We already did that. Then we have to learn the names of the organs of the endocrine system on the model. We are going to do that. And then we have to learn the names of the hormones of the endocrine system and their functions. So let's okay. So the first neuroendocrine organ we are going to learn about is hypothalamus. I said neuroendocrine, why? Because hypothalamus, it has a neural component and it has a hormonal or endocrine component. So hypothalamus is a neuroendocrine gland, meaning it has both neuronal and endocrine functions. Okay, so this I took it from your Pearson material because just I want to orient you. So this egg-shaped thing is the thalamus, this purple, and over here is the hypothalamus, and then hanging from the hypothalamus through a stalk which is known as infundibulum is this pituitary gland. Please notice that this pituitary gland is bilobed. It has an interior lobe and it has a posterior lobe. So this hypothalamus is part of our endocrine and this pituitary gland is part of our endocrine system. And then going posteriorly, this is the interior part of the brain, this is the posterior because the cerebellum is present posteriorly. This is the pineal gland, and this pineal gland, it responds to the melatonin and it is associated with the day-night cycle. This is also part of our endocrine system. Now let's go over other parts of the endocrine system. We already said that hypothalamus, which is present in the brain, it is a part of endocrine system. Then there is a pineal gland present posteriorly, and hanging anteroinferiorly from the hypothalamus is the pituitary gland. It is labeled number 1 over here. This labeled number 4 is the pituitary stalk. Through the pituitary stalk, this pituitary gland is hanging from the hypothalamus. This number 2, the darker portion, is the anterior pituitary, and this number 3 is the posterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary is also known as adenohypophysis. Why? Because it is a true gland. When we look at the slides of the anterior pituitary, you will see glandular tissue. And this posterior pituitary is also known as neurohypophysis because actually it is a part of the nervous system. It is not a true gland. The hormones which are present in the posterior pituitary, they are not synthesized in the posterior pituitary. They are synthesized in the hypothalamus, and then from hypothalamus there are direct nerve fibers which are coming in the posterior pituitary. So those hormones, they travel in those nerve fibers and they are stored in the posterior pituitary and they are released when there is stimulus. So this is important that you know. Pituitary gland has 2 lobes. Anterior pituitary is the adenohypophysis and posterior pituitary is the neurohypophysis. And then this pituitary stalk is known as infundibulum. Now let's move to the neck. In the neck we have thyroid gland. This thyroid gland, which is labeled number 5, it is present below the larynx. Larynx is where your Adam's apple is. And this is a bilobed gland. The 2 lobes, they are joined by a central horizontal band which is known as isthmus of the thyroid gland. So these are 2 lobes of the thyroid gland, and number 7 is the isthmus of the thyroid gland. You cannot see it very clearly, but if you look in your text, you will be able to see it. Okay, now there are parathyroid glands which are embedded in the thyroid gland on the posterior surface. So these shiny specks which you can see embedded in the thyroid gland, these are parathyroid glands. They can be from 4 to 8 in number. Now let's go to number 13. This is the pancreas. This is present in the abdomen. This is kind of elongated like this structure present in the abdomen. Now this brings us to the adrenal glands. Adrenal glands are triangular structures. These labeled number 9 over here. They are sitting on top of the kidney. And each adrenal gland, it is covered by a capsule. So the outermost layer is a capsule which is labeled number 10. Inside the capsule, the outer portion of the adrenal gland is known as cortex and the inner portion of the adrenal gland is known as medulla. So this number 12 is the medulla, number 11 is the cortex, and 10 is the surrounding capsule. These adrenal glands, they are sitting on top of each kidney, labeled number 9 in this diagram. And then moving in the pelvis we have testes and ovaries. Ovaries in the female, testes in the male. So these over here labeled number 20, they are the ovaries. And this number 16 is the testes. So these you have to recognize all of these organs of the endocrine system. Next portion is the histology. So this is a slide of pituitary gland. This is how it is going to appear under the microscope. And I encourage all of you to go to PAL in your Pearson resources, and you can look at the slides. You can look at different magnifications. So this, the darker portion, which is labeled number 1, this is the anterior pituitary or the adenohypophysis, and this, the lighter area, is the posterior pituitary or the neurohypophysis. The anterior pituitary, it contains the glandular tissue. So if we are able to, if you go to the PAL, you will be able to see that there are small circles lined by cuboidal cells where the hormones are being prepared. Whereas in the number 2, mostly you will find the neural glial cells, the supporting neural tissue in the number 2, because this is neurohypophysis. Now this is a slide of thyroid gland. In thyroid gland we have thyroid follicles. This thing labeled number 3, which I am encircling, this is a thyroid follicle. These thyroid follicles, they are filled with colloid. This proteinaceous substance inside, this is known as colloid. This pinkish thing you see inside the follicle, this is known as colloid. And these thyroid follicles, they are lined by cuboidal epithelium. Okay. Whenever there will be glandular tissue, you will find cuboidal epithelium lining it. And then we also have parafollicular cells. These parafollicular cells, they are present between the follicles, which are labeled number 6. So these cells which are present between the follicles, these are parafollicular cells. Now these parafollicular cells, they secrete a different hormone. They are also known as C cells, they secrete calcitonin, whereas the thyroid follicle and the cuboidal cells of the thyroid follicle, they secrete thyroid hormones. This is a slide of pancreas. Pancreas, it has islets of Langerhans, and then it has acinar cells. So this majority of the pinkish portion, these are acinar cells of the pancreas, and you will also be able to see a pancreatic duct. The acinar cells of the pancreas, they secrete the non-hormonal part of the pancreas, because pancreas also secretes some digestive juices which are collected by the pancreatic duct, and then they are released in the small intestines. So the darker cells are the acinar cells. It says acini, but you can write acinar cells, and they are making that the digestive enzyme, which is being collected by the duct and secreted into the small intestine. And these lighter part, these are the pancreatic islets or islets of Langerhans. They have two types of cells. They have alpha cells and beta cells. The alpha cells, they secrete a hormone known as glucagon, and the beta cells, they secrete a hormone known as insulin. So these lighter portion, this is the endocrine portion of the pancreas. This is a slide of adrenal gland. Adrenal gland, remember we just saw their triangular glands sitting on each kidney. The outermost covering is the adrenal capsule. Inside the adrenal capsule, there is adrenal cortex. So from here till here, this 5, 6 and 7, this is adrenal cortex. Inside adrenal cortex, this labeled number 8, we have adrenal medulla. This adrenal cortex has 3 zones. The outermost zone is zona glomerulosa. Inner to zona glomerulosa, we have zona fasciculata. And inside zona fasciculata, we have zona reticularis. Zona glomerulosa, it secretes mineralocorticoids. The most important one is aldosterone. Zona fasciculata, it secretes glucocorticoids. The most important is cortisol. And zona reticularis, it secretes adrenal sex hormones. Okay, and this zona 6 and 7, they kind of overlap in their secretion, but zona glomerulosa, it secretes mostly aldosterone. And then we have adrenal medulla, which secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine. Now let's go over this activity number 2, hormones of the endocrine system. So we have to read the information about the key hormones from part A to G, and we have to identify the key hormones of each endocrine organ, their target cells and their function. So this is in this we will also cover the number 4, in which there will be diagram feedback of the feedback pathways associated with the hormones. Now so this is, let's go over the interior hypothalamic interior pituitary hormones. So I got this diagram from your Pearson e-text so it can be more clear. So just remember, we are on interior pituitary. This is the anterior pituitary, this is the posterior pituitary. So interior, this is hypothalamus, interior pituitary. Stimulation of for both of these lobes is different. Interior pituitary, it is stimulated by the hormones of the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus, it secretes certain hormones. Those hormones enter the blood, right, approximately over here, and then they travel to the anterior pituitary, and then the anterior pituitary, it secretes certain hormones in response to the hypothalamic hormone. This is known as hypophyseal portal system. This bed of capillaries, which you can see here, is known as hypophyseal portal system. And please notice the hormones which are secreted by the hypothalamus, uh, they come in the blood, and then they are kind of like drained by this interior pituitary. They don't get the time to enter the systemic circulation because they have a very small path to go, but they come from here to here in the blood, and then most of them, they are taken up by the anterior pituitary because target cells are present in the anterior pituitary, whereas the hormones which are secreted by the anterior pituitary, they enter the systemic circulation. Let's go over this figure in your manual. This is known as hypothalamic interior pituitary axis. You will also read this term at many places. So this yellow bar, it indicates hypothalamus. This orangish bar, it indicates anterior pituitary, and then these purplish boxes, these are the target organs. So these are the hormones which are released by the hypothalamus. Let's look at these hormones. First of all, this is gonadotropin releasing hormone. You have to know the abbreviation and you have to know the name. You can consult your textbook to find the name of this hormone, which is abbreviated like this. This is gonadotropin releasing hormone. So the hypothalamus, it secretes gonadotropin releasing hormone, which goes in the hypophyseal portal system and travels to the interior pituitary. In the interior pituitary, it stimulates the specific cells to make follicle stimulating hormone, abbreviated as FSH, and luteinizing hormone, abbreviated as LH. And these hormones, they are secreted in the blood. Through the blood, they go to the gonads. Gonads are ovaries and testes, and in the female, they cause development of the ovum or egg, and in the males, they cause development of sperms. And they also cause the females to secrete estradiol and progesterone, and the males to secrete testosterone. And now let's go to the second hormone. The second hormone, which is secreted by the hypothalamus, it is growth hormone releasing hormone. So this growth hormone releasing hormone, it is released into the blood in the hypophyseal portal system. It goes to the anterior pituitary. In the anterior pituitary, it causes the stimulation and release of growth hormone. This growth hormone then goes to these target organs, because these target organs, they have specific receptors for the growth hormone, and it causes its effects. Now let's go to the this. So this SST is somatostatin. It is also known as growth hormone inhibiting hormone. Okay, so this somatostatin, it has a negative effect on the interior pituitary. It means that it stops the production and release of growth hormone. Now let's go to the fourth hormone. This is thyrotropin releasing hormone. R means releasing. So this TRH, it is released by the hypothalamus. It travels in the hypophyseal portal system, goes to the anterior pituitary. In the anterior pituitary, it secretes thyroid stimulating hormone. This thyroid stimulating hormone again is released in the blood. It goes to the thyroid gland, which is located in the neck, and it causes the thyroid gland to secrete thyroid hormones, which are thyroxine and triiodothyronine T4 and T3. Now, this is dopamine. Dopamine is also known as prolactin inhibiting hormone. This dopamine or prolactin inhibiting hormone, it goes to the anterior pituitary. In anterior pituitary, it stops the synthesis and release of prolactin. So this prolactin, the target cells are present in the breasts, because this prolactin, it is important in the development and production of milk in the women. So when this hormone is present, this prolactin is inhibited. Now we have another hormone, CR8 or corticotropin releasing hormone. It is released from the hypothalamus. It goes into the hypophyseal portal system, comes to the anterior pituitary. It has a short pathway in the anterior pituitary. It stimulates the production and release of ACTH, adrenocorticotropin hormone. This ACTH is released into the blood and it goes to the adrenal cortex. Now please notice adrenal cortex. Remember I said adrenal gland has adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla. So this ACTH is only stimulating adrenal cortex. It is not stimulating adrenal medulla. And from adrenal cortex also it stimulates the zona fasciculata and the zona reticularis. It does not stimulate zona glomerulosa. The stimulus for zona glomerulosa is not primarily from the hypothalamus. So please notice this important fact. And now these, as you can see, these are the pathways. In your lab exercise, you will find certain these boxes or charts, and you have to fill in these pathways. You can take help from this image, and you can also take help from your textbook. We have discussed the anterior hypothalamus anterior pituitary axis. Now let's talk about hypothalamic posterior pituitary. So from the posterior pituitary, the hormones, they are prepared in the paraventricular and the supraoptic nuclei of the posterior pituitary, and as you can see, the axons of these neurons, they are directly coming into the posterior pituitary through the infundibulum. So these hormones which are prepared here and here, they come to the posterior pituitary and then they are stored in the posterior pituitary. So posterior pituitary is basically a storage area for the hormones. It does not synthesize the hormones. That is why posterior pituitary is also known as neurohypophysis. So when the stimulus comes, in these axons, the hormones which are stored over here, they are released into the blood. These hormones are oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. Now let's go over this part C. It talks about the thyroid hormones. So this is from your manual. You can always go over it. I will quickly tell you some points, but please go over these afterwards. So thyroid gland is one of the largest endocrine gland of the body. It secretes thyroid hormones. Thyroid hormones are T3 and T4. T4 is thyroxine, T3 is triiodothyronine. And thyroid hormone, it has many functions in the body. It increases the metabolic rate, it regulates the tissue growth, it also works to maintain the blood pressure. And then remember when we went over the histology slides, I said there are also parafollicular cells in the thyroid gland. These parafollicular cells or C cells are present between the thyroid follicles. They secrete a hormone known as calcitonin. Now this is important to note that calcitonin secretion, it is not under the regulation of the anterior pituitary. So when anterior pituitary secretes TSH, that TSH causes release of thyroid hormones. It does not cause release of calcitonin. Calcitonin is released when there are to decrease the calcium levels in the body. When the calcium homeostasis it is affected and the body needs to decrease the level of calcium in the blood, it is at that time calcitonin is secreted. Now we have parathyroid glands which are embedded on the posterior surface of the thyroid gland. These yellowish, shiny, embedded circles. These are the parathyroid glands. And parathyroid gland, they secrete a hormone known as parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid thyroid hormone, it controls the calcium homeostasis and it is secreted in response to low calcium levels. So this is also important. Parathyroid hormone, the stimulus is not anterior pituitary hormone. It is when the calcium levels are low in the blood, then parathyroid hormones they are released, and these parathyroid hormones they act on the kidneys. In the kidneys they cause reabsorption of the calcium from the kidney tubules. Then they also cause activation of vitamin D, and that vitamin D it results in more absorption of calcium from the intestines. And then they also stimulate the bone cells, the bone eating cells or the bone resorbing cells, which are known as osteoclast. When these the bone is eaten by these cells, the calcium is released into the blood because their primary purpose is to maintain the level of calcium in the blood. This parathyroid hormone. Next hormone are the adrenal hormones. This is the adrenal gland sitting on top of the kidney. We have two of these, and this slide I just put in here so I can remind you that it has cortex and it has medulla, and cortex has three zones, and each zone of cortex has its own specific hormone. So now let's talk about the adrenal medulla first. Adrenal medulla, it secretes catecholamines, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Now this is important. This adrenal medulla, it is stimulated by the sympathetic nerve fibers. So this is also a neuroendocrine gland like the hypothalamus. Okay. So the neural component is that the sympathetic fibers are coming and they're stimulating the adrenal medulla. As a result, the adrenal medulla is going to secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. So please read about it from your text as well, and please make a point of it in your mind. Remember this. And now let's go to the adrenal cortex. Adrenal cortex, we have zona glomerulosa. This secretes aldosterone. Aldosterone is a mineralocorticoid. Then we have zona fasciculata. Zona fasciculata, it secretes glucocorticoids. Cortisol is a very important glucocorticoid. And then we have zona reticularis. Zona reticularis, it secretes androgens. So these androgens, they are like sex hormones. They are not in as much amount as secreted by the ovaries and the testes, but we also have adrenal androgens, which are secreted by zone number 7. So you have to know, you have to be able to recognize what is number 5 and what is the secretion of number 5, what is the stimulus for number 5. And then you have to know what is the secretion of number 6 and what is the stimulus for number 6 and what is the secretion of number 7 and what is the secretion, what is the stimulus for number 7 and secretion. So I want to make a point here that zona glomerulosa, it is stimulated by the by low blood pressure. When we have low blood pressure, that low blood pressure it sets out certain certain pathways activated, and as a result aldosterone is secreted. So the major stimulant of zone 5 or zona glomerulosa is not hypothalamus and anterior pituitary, it is low blood pressure. Whereas 6 and 7, it is hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. ACTH is secreted by the anterior pituitary and CRH is secreted by the hypothalamus, and they stimulate zone 6 and 7. So please read about it and be sure that you know the secretion and the stimulus for each of these labels. Now this is the pancreas. This is how it looks like. And pancreas, it contains islets of Langerhans. Like I said before, those they have alpha cells and beta cells. These islets of Langerhans, these are the endocrine part of the pancreas, and the alpha cells they release glucagon, and the beta cells they release insulin. Okay, and then we have gonads. Gonads are the ovaries and the testes, and they secrete sex hormones, which are estrogens and progesterone in the females and testosterone in the male. Now we have come to our activity number 3. So in this, we are going to learn about about this objective number 5 and the objective number 6. Objective number 5 is that you have to differentiate between negative and positive feedback mechanisms, and objective number 6 that you have to differentiate between hyposecretion and hypersecretion, because each of the endocrine gland, if they secrete too much of the hormone, we will call that hypersecretion, and it is going to have exaggerated effects, and if it is too much, then it will be a disease. Similarly for the hyposecretion, you have certain pathways, figures like this in your manual. You have to fill these. You are going to consult your Pearson e-text, and you have to do this, and then you have to send me uh, the pictures or of these filled up, and I will grade these. This is your lab exercise which you have to do. So you have to write down here that what is the stimulus, the name of the hormone which was secreted by the hypothalamus, and then the name of the hormone which is secreted by the anterior pituitary, and then the name of the hormone which is secreted by the third gland, and then the target cells. What are the target cells? So you have to fill these. You can take help from your Pearson e-text. So this is the first one. So you have to fill this out. That what is this? So this is posterior pituitary, right? So just to, I will only tell you that the stimulus, it will be a neuronal stimulus, and then the hypothalamus, it will secrete oxytocin and ADH, right? Plasma hormones. And then what are the targets of oxytocin? Oxytocin, it acts on the breast and the uterus, and the ADH, it acts on the kidney tubules. You can find it in your Pearson e-text. You have to read and you have to do it, this activity yourself. So these are all of these. The name of the hormone is present on the top to give you a hint that what you need to fill. So just remember, you have to fill the stimulus, the hormone, the target organ, and response of the target organ, and overall effect on the body. And remember, this broken line is for the negative feedback, and these solid gray lines are for the positive feedback or the pathway. So you have many of these in your manual. You have to do all of them. Now let's come to the activity number 4. In activity number 4, we are going to cover the objective number 7 and 8. So the objective number 7 is name key endocrine disorders associated with the endocrine pathways. And then in number 8, we have to differentiate between primary, secondary, and tertiary endocrine disorders. Let's talk about pathophysiology of the endocrine system. And these pathophysiologies can occur when there is a damage to the feedback system, like we just went over, that hypothalamus is secreting certain hormones and anterior pituitary is secreting certain hormones, then other endocrine glands are secreting certain hormones. So if there is a damage to the feedback system, we can get abnormal amounts of hormones. So this damage can result in hypersecretion or hyposecretion. Okay, and sometimes there can be some problem with the gland itself, and it can secrete too much hormone or too little hormone. So both of these conditions, they are considered diseases and pathologies. And this can also occur if the target cells, they do not respond to the secreted hormone. Sometimes the target cells, they become desensitized. They do not respond to the hormone as they should. And sometimes the target cells or organs, they can be damaged or destroyed, or sometimes there might be a tumor present in the gland which is secreting either too much or. Let's see what happens when antidiuretic hormone is either secreted more or less. So this antidiuretic hormone is abbreviated as ADH. It is also known as vasopressin. You have to know all three of these terms. I want you to just ponder upon this name, antidiuretic. Diuresis means the formation of urine. Okay, so antidiuretic hormone means it is against the formation of urine. So it means that when ADH is present, it causes reabsorption of water from the kidney tubules. As a result, the amount of urine produced is very small. So now just imagine what will happen if there is too little antidiuretic hormone. When there is too little antidiuretic hormone, that water will not be reabsorbed back in the body, and that water will be passed in the urine. So the patient suffers from increased urination and low blood volume. Okay, now there can be two reasons. One reason can be maybe the posterior pituitary, it is not producing enough ADH. Okay, so when the posterior pituitary is the cause, we say this is central diabetes insipidus. But just imagine that the posterior pituitary is doing its job. It is releasing ADH into the blood, but the kidney cells, they are unable to respond to that antidiuretic hormone. So we call that disease nephrogenic diabetes, diabetes insipidus. Okay, so it can be central, it can be nephrogenic. And how do the clinicians differentiate? They give synthetic vasopressin. When vasopressin is given, right? So now just imagine someone is being injected by vasopressin, and the kidney cells, they are not responding. So there will be no effect, right? The urine. There will be no effect on the amount of the urine. But what if the defect was in the posterior pituitary and vasopressin was absent? In this case, we will get a response, right, from the kidney tubules. So this is how they differentiate. The second hormone in your manual is the growth hormone. It is anterior pituitary hormone. And this growth hormone, it is very important that it be present in children. If it is there is hypersecretion during childhood, it leads to a condition known as pituitary dwarfism. If you look this man over here, when he was a child, he did not have enough growth hormone, so he did not grow to his maximum height, the maximum potential he had to grow. He did not grow in height. But look, all the proportions are the body is proportional, but he did not grow tall. Then there is a condition known as gigantism, and it is hypersecretion before puberty. So this man had too much growth hormone before puberty. As a result, he's taller than normal people. And then there is a condition known as acromegaly. So now consider this woman, acromegaly, it happens in the adults. In the adults, when there is too much growth hormone, now a person cannot grow taller. So what happens? The bones of the face and also of the hand and the feet, they become bigger. So this is the same woman. So this poor lady, she had hypersecretion of growth hormone when she was an adult, and this is how her facial features, they changed because of the extra growth of the bones. And similarly, she would have, if we had a picture of her hands and feet, they will be thicker fingers and thicker knuckles. Then we have anterior pituitary hormone prolactin. So prolactin, because it causes production of milk. If there is too much of prolactin, there is a condition known as galactorrhea, okay, which is due to hypersecretion. So the patient, it can have some discharge from the nipples. Then we have thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone, there are two conditions given in your manual: hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. What happens in hypothyroidism? Thyroid hormone is associated with the metabolic activity. So when there is less amount of thyroid hormone, the metabolic activity will decrease, body temperature will be low, the patient will feel cold, then they have puffy eyes, and sometimes they develop goiter. So this moment, this swelling in the neck, it is known as goiter. So you can read about more detail about the goiter in your Pearson e-text. Many times people get goiter when there is iodine deficiency. That is why they add iodine to the salt. So this is hypothyroidism. And then there is a condition known as hyperthyroidism. In hyperthyroidism, there is increased metabolic rate, and also there is increased heart rate. There is unexplained weight loss, and these people, they have protruded eyes, like it is known as exophthalmos. The eyes, they are very prominent and protruding. And a common disorder which comes under hyperthyroidism is known as Graves' disease. Now, the another hormone is parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone, it is associated with the calcium homeostasis. So what happens if there is a tumor in the parathyroid gland? It leads to hyperparathyroidism. Now, when there is this causes increased blood in the calcium. And where is that calcium coming from? When we were on doing on the slide of the parathyroid hormone, I said that parathyroid hormone, it acts on the osteoclast cells. Osteoclast cells are the bone-eating cells. So they remove the calcium from the bone. As a result, the bones, they become brittle. And in the blood, there is hypercalcemia. So that hypercalcemia can have dangerous effects on the heart and the nervous system, because we know that calcium plays a very important role in action potentials and in contractions. Then in case of hypoparathyroidism, which can be due to damage of the parathyroid gland, and sometimes these parathyroid glands, they're removed during thyroid surgery. Just recall that parathyroid glands, they're embedded in the thyroid gland. So, and this can result in hypoglycemia, which can lead to respiratory paralysis, and also it can lead to death, and due to increased tetany in the muscles. Next is epinephrine. How can epinephrine increase in the body? There is a tumor which is known as pheochromocytoma. It is tumor of the chromaffin cells. These chromaffin cells, they secrete catecholamines. Catecholamines are epinephrine and norepinephrine, and they have the same effects as the sympathetic nervous system. They increase the blood pressure, they increase the heart rate, they increase the sweating. Now the next hormone is cortisol. Cortisol, if there is hypersecretion of cortisol, we get a syndrome which is known as Cushing syndrome. Cushing syndrome can be due to hypersecretion of the ACTH. Recall that ACTH is secreted by the anterior pituitary. So now just consider that anterior pituitary has a tumor, and if that tumor is secreting ACTH, so that ACTH will lead to too much secretion of the cortisol from the zona fasciculata. And or it can also be increased if the tumor is present in the adrenal cortex, and that tumor is making too much of the cortisol. So in either case, we will have Cushing syndrome. What will happen in Cushing syndrome? Please read from your Pearson e-text. They have a table where they have given the effects of different hormones, or all of the hormones they have given. And whenever there is too much secretion of a hormone, its normal physiological effects will become exaggerated. So there is going to be high blood glucose level, there is going to be hypertension, edema. These are the common signs. And what are how will the patient appear? The outward indications is the patient will have a swollen face. It is known as moon face. And then there is a particular distribution of the fat, which is more in the abdominal region and the neck. They get a hump on the neck, and they have big protruding abdomens and moon face. It is not so much on their legs. Their legs are not that swollen compared to their abdominal region. And then there is Addison disease. Addison disease is due to hyposecretion of cortisol. Okay, so you have to remember which syndrome is due to hypersecretion, which disease is due to hyposecretion. Patients, they have unexplained weight loss, they have low blood glucose, and they have low sodium levels. and they also have hypotension and dehydration, and they also have tanning of the skin. Okay, so in Addison disease, you can please go in your Pearson e-text and read about these diseases. And then this brings us to the aldosterone. There is a condition known as aldosteronism, or when there is hypersecretion of aldosterone, it is known as aldosteronism, and it causes increased sodium reabsorption from the kidneys. And just remember, whenever sodium is reabsorbed, water follows the sodium. Water loves sodium, so when sodium is reabsorbed, water follows the sodium. As a result, there is sodium and water retention, and this leads to increased blood volume, hypertension, and edema. And there is also increased loss of potassium. When you read about the effects of aldosterone, it preserves the sodium and it causes excretion of the potassium. And what can go wrong with the sex hormones? So there is a condition known as hypogonadism. This is the disease resulting in a deficiency in sex hormones. It is typically caused due to damage or tumor in the pituitary gland, and it results in the underdevelopment of secondary sex characteristics, decrease in sex cells, and potential infertility. Now this brings us to a very important hormone, which is known as insulin. As you know that there is a condition known as diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is due to hyposecretion of insulin. There are two types, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is due to hyposecretion of insulin, which can be due to damage or dysfunction of the pancreatic beta cells. Just recall, in the pancreas, there are islets of Langerhans. Those islets of Langerhans have alpha cells and beta cells. Beta cells are the one which secrete insulin. So if they get damaged or they are not functioning properly, we call that type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes usually happens in children and younger adults. And the treatment for type 1 diabetes, we always have to replace it with insulin. And then the type 2 diabetes, it is due to insensitivity to the insulin. So the cells, they are no longer giving response to the insulin, and this usually happens in adults and in obese people. Usually the obese people, they have resistance to insulin. So, and when the treatment is started, first the drugs are given to these patients, and later on, many of them, they require insulin as well. So the indication of diabetes are 3 P's: polydipsia, increased thirst; polyphagia, increased hunger; and polyuria, increased urination. This brings us to the last topic of this lab exercise. We have primary pathology, secondary pathology, and tertiary pathology. You can read it from your manual. I will go over and try to explain you, taking example of the thyroid gland. So here is the pathway for our thyroid hormone secretion. Hypothalamus, it secretes a hormone known as thyrotropin releasing hormone. This goes to the anterior pituitary, and it causes the anterior pituitary to secrete thyrotropin stimulating hormone. This stimulating hormones goes to the thyroid gland, and it causes the secretion of thyroid hormones. These thyroid hormones, then they act on the target cells. Now just imagine there is some problem with the thyroid gland. Because of that, thyroid gland is not secreting enough thyroid hormones, right? As a result, there are low levels of thyroid hormones in the blood. So we will say that this is primary disease. Primary disease is caused by the disorder of the final endocrine gland, right? It can be anyone. In case of Addison disease, it will be the adrenal cortex. Okay, so over here we're considering the example of the thyroid gland, that there is some problem with the thyroid gland. So this rest of the pathway is working normally. So the hypothalamus is secreting TRH. TRH is secreting TSH, but this TSH is going to the thyroid hormone, but thyroid hormone is unable to secrete the thyroid hormones. So what will happen as a result? I want you to consider these certain things. So the thyroid hormones are going to be low, right? The problem is here. We are talking about when the problem is here. There is primary disease. The thyroid hormones are going to be low. Now, as a result, what will happen? That this feedback, a negative feedback, is not there. So what will happen? This TSH will be more. Interior pituitary will think something is wrong. The thyroid hormone is not listening. I need to make more stimulating hormone, right? So thyroid hormone can, the thyroid gland can make the hormone. And similarly, this hypothalamus will think that I need to make more TRH. So there will be increased production of TRH, right? So that's why when a patient comes to a physician, they don't only get the thyroid hormone checked, they get the profile, they get all of these hormones checked. So when the problem, there is primary deficiency of the thyroid gland, and the reason is the thyroid gland, this is the profile we will get. Low thyroid hormones, T3 and T4 will be low, TSH will be high, TRH will be high. We will interpret these results and we will say this is a primary disease. Now just imagine that the problem is at this level, at the level of the anterior pituitary. We call this secondary disease. Let me put an S over here. So this is we have a secondary disease. Now what will happen? That it means that anterior pituitary is not being able to make thyroid stimulating hormone. Alright, so although we have this TRH, it is coming, but anterior pituitary is not being able to make thyroid stimulating hormone. So now this is the profile we are getting. Now the hypothalamus, it is making TRH. This TRH is coming to the anterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary cannot make enough TSH. As a result, the thyroid gland is not making enough thyroid hormone. And now there is no negative feedback to the anterior pituitary. But anterior pituitary cannot help it. It cannot increase making more. It cannot increase TSH because it is the damaged part. And then it goes to the hypothalamus, and hypothalamus makes more TRH. So this is the profile we are going to get in the secondary disease. Now just imagine, now let's consider a third scenario. The third scenario is this, and that thyroid hormone is working fine. Okay, anterior pituitary is also working fine. The problem is over here. So now let's see what will happen. Let's start from the I'm trying to rub this off. Let's start from TRH. So now what is happening? Hypothalamus is not making enough TRH. As a result, now we have less TSH. As a result, now we have less thyroid hormone. So this is the tertiary disease when the problem is in the TRH. So this is how we figure out. And similarly, the other way around, if there is too much too much thyroid hormone, maybe there is a tumor in the thyroid, right? Maybe there is a thyroid tumor and it is making too much of the thyroid hormone. Now this thyroid hormone is going to have a negative effect here, and there will be too little TSH and also too little TRH. So the physician, it is actually very interesting, the physician can figure out that at which level the disease is. So if it is at the level of the final endocrine gland, we call it primary disease. If it is at the level of the anterior pituitary, we call it secondary disease. If it is at the level of the hypothalamus, we call it tertiary disease.